Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this November 6th, 2015 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, and you're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can listen to my show every evening, Monday through Friday, from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. I hope you enjoyed the show I did yesterday on the day before on Tupper Saucy and the book Rulers of Evil. Go to those two shows. I'll be putting them up on my website at arcticbeacon.com shortly. And it's really a good interview that I did in 2006 that was lost and now found, and played again for you to listen to Tupper's voice and to hear what he was a little bit all about. Get his book, Rulers of Evil, and you'll learn more about him. It's a book that's a must-read if you really want to understand what's going on today. Well, anyway, I thought since somebody uncovered a bunch of these old stories of mine, these old interviews, one that always came to mind to me was Phil Kronzer. Now, I interviewed Phil in April 25, 2006, about corruption in the Vatican involving Mother Mary apparitions. Phil is a devout Catholic, and you have to remember that when you listen to this. He told listeners how he has been targeted and how his life has been turned upside down as his wife of 39 years has been the subject of mind control by these cults, by the cult in Medjugorje where they went. Don't miss this interview, I said. And so, since it's been lost and not heard, I tried to track Phil down, and it's very difficult. Why don't you listen to the beginning of this interview, and then I'll get into some comments about it that updates the story, and maybe perhaps we can find Phil. I know he's been sought after by the authorities for bogus charges, and let's listen to Phil Kronzer talk about how corruption in the Catholic Church and the Vatican goes deep into these Mother Mary sightings and where the money actually does go at places like Fatima and Medjugorje. Here's Phil Kronzer, and I'm going to play this all the way through so you can hear some, probably hear a few commercials, but it's hard to splice it up, so I'm going to do it that way today. I hope you enjoy it.
Miracles and murder. You're listening to the Investigative Journal, and those two words, miracles and murder. That's the subject of our show today. We're going to be talking to Phil Kronzer first in the first hour after I finish up a few things and clear off my desk regarding Mother Mary apparitions and other things. And then in the second hour, we're going to go to Florida, travel to Florida in the Investigative Journal and talk to Steve Esdale, who's just filed a federal lawsuit trying to get to the bottom of corruption, saying that certain people in the Florida government and a DEA agent from Bolivia with the complicity of people all the way up to Jeb Bush killed his father. We're going to get to that story and update on that. But before I do, it's really, let me just try to clear this up in in a literary manner. But I want to just go on the record, and let's just clear this up from the beginning, that it's really the enemy. I have no bias on, I really want to find out who the enemy is of the American people. President Bush has declared a spiritual war, so I want to find out who it is. And I don't want to leave any stone unturned. And with that, we have to discuss the Muslims. We have to discuss the Jews. We have to discuss perhaps the Jesuits who are infiltrated the Catholic Church and the Catholic religion and what's going on there, the Mormons, the rest of them. If there's a spiritual war, my God, let's uncover it. Now, today I was talking to a Jesuit, the communications director, on my ongoing quest with my conversation with the Jesuits. That you can get every Sunday. It's Confessions with the Jesuits on Arctic Beacon. But today I talked to two of them, and let me get down to this right now. I talked to, last week I talked to a couple Jesuit priests, but today I talked to the communications director of, this is at Fordham University, that's a Jesuit university. I'm trying to get an interview with Avery Cardinal Dulles, and if you don't know who he is, he's 87 years old. He's a high-up cardinal in the Jesuit order, and he's the son of Foster Dulles, former Secretary of State. So there's an interesting connection there, and I wanted to see if he'd go on the record and talk to me about some of the criticisms leveled by people regarding the Jesuit order and some questions about history that I would like to be enlightened about. So we're trying that. Then I called, and let me tell you this, I felt like I was in a different world. I mean, I called up the Wisconsin province and talked to Phil Nero, who is the communications director, and I said I'd like to talk with somebody about the Jesuit order. I'm doing an article about the Catholic Church, and they said, well, what's your topic? Well, of course, I went into, if you listen to what I talk about in this show, I went into that, and he basically made me feel like I was in a completely different world. He had no idea what I was talking about, according to him. And now I have to do an email basically doing what he said, and that is to do this. Please put it, that's what I was talking about, it, in a concise message so that we can see if anyone here, he says, I doubt if anybody at this level knows about the fact that maybe the Jesuits are controlling the Pope and all the things we talk about. So I found it to be quite interesting. So I'm going on a journey to at least talk about it. So if you remember in my article, I'm going to get to this in a minute, and we'll get to Phil Kronzer. I outlined in an article last Sunday
Okay, there was a little break there. I had a telephone call, and sometimes I have to interrupt because it was an important call. So let me get back to my interview with Phil Kronzer.
Said we should get after all of them, and that includes Al-Qaeda. Let's try to look at whether the extremist Muslims are the problem, as said by President Bush, Congress, and the media. I find one interesting point there is there aren't many facts they give us that hold water. We're going to get into that. And then I go on to the Jews, which the alternative press likes to talk about all the time. Of course, then I go on to the Satan-worshipping Illuminati, and then I go to the Jesuits and the Catholic Church. So listen, all of them need to be discussed. We'll be back with an important element of that story in 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm trying to go past the commercials and see if we can get the show up again, which I'm having trouble doing. But anyway, we're trying to get this interview with Phil Kronzer.
I talked to Phil Kronzer because this falls right into it. I'm looking forward to this, having this update with Phil, because what a guy he is. And you're going to hear this story because you're going to see how a miracle destroyed his life, supposedly as a Mother Mary apparition. So we're going to get to that. But let me say this. Now, how do people ignore this story? I mean, I am, as a journalist, I'm pretty objective. And this story, if I'm going to send it around to like some alternative places, I'm going to send it around to some other newspapers. Maybe I'll send it back to the first newspaper I ever worked for in Naples, Florida, or one that I worked for in Pontiac, Michigan. I'll see if they'll cover it. Say, hey, I'm a former journalist. I've got a story here, and it's not one that I've gone, I'm not older now and gone crazy and just writing opinions. Here's a story that's based on fact, and then let me start it off by saying this. Vatican in possession of top secret CIA documents about atomic weapons program, according to discovery made recently in Northern California federal court case involving Vatican Bank. Experts were left shaking their heads over the shocking discovery as church critics were questioning what the Vatican was doing with sensitive CIA documents ultimately involved in protecting national security interests of our country. What are these priests doing with this kind of stuff? I mean, it's just amazing. And I started off the story. I said, what really goes on in the underground catacombs of the Vatican has always been a deep, dark secret. Over the past years, disenchanted priests and unwilling witnesses have come forward with horrific tales of child sacrificing. But now, according to an explosive CIA document never before made public, you're hearing it here first, top officials have also been hiding under their black robes sensitive secret documents about high-powered rockets, atomic energy, and nuclear weapons. This goes back to a top-secret 1947 CIA document never declassified, surfaced last week during a deposition in the case of Alprin v. Vatican Bank. The case filed on behalf of Emil Alprin and others against the Vatican Bank, a.k.a. Institute of Religious Works, in the United States District Court for Northern California, deals with an accounting of World War II assets allegedly looted by church officials from Yugoslavia. So that's a strange case. Now, this document comes up showing that, and if you go to my website, www.arcticbeacon.com, you can read about it, and I just ask you this question. What are church officials doing with secret documents? And let me ask that question to my guest, Phil Kronzer. Phil, what are they doing with this stuff?
Well, it's hard to say, but I've got some connections that probably would connect a few more of the dots. The story is so massive, it's hard to get your arms around it.
Yeah, and I mean,
so many tentacles.
It's incredible. I'm sitting here going, these everybody's questioning whether, and sometimes you get criticism. Well, you shouldn't criticize the Vatican hierarchy. And I say, well, doesn't anybody want to know why they have these documents about nuclear weaponry back in World War II? I mean, could they have the same information now about what's going on in the Middle East? Are they involved in the war? I mean, these are all questions that should be answered. Don't you agree?
Well, somehow it's all connected. And as you know, Greg, Jonathan Levy is my attorney as well, the same attorney you're talking about that's involved with the Vatican bank suit. And my part of it is only one small part of a massive, massive story of what I've been through for 12 years now.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to bring you back is that I know some people have some questions from the last time we were on. And let me just, because after I wrote the story, I found myself explaining Medjugorje over and over again to people. And I was basically trying to explain what it was and what happened to you. But I'd like you, what happened recently, I just did another story where the same bishop that you mentioned, Bishop Pavel Nilica, a Jesuit bishop, was also involved in the Amsterdam Mother Mary apparitions, and how another gentleman had filed an official objection to how maybe Nilica manipulated this phony apparition to be approved in 2002 after this was about a 50-year controversy in the church. So I thought this was appropriate to talk about that, and then to bring back Medjugorje, which is another one of these apparitions, which you say is totally false, and Nilica's is somehow his name comes up again. So why don't you explain to everyone what Medjugorje is, how it relates to Amsterdam and this bishop, and what happened to you, and personal story also. Go ahead.
Well, yes, Bishop Pavel Nilica's name comes up everywhere, and I'm very familiar with the Amsterdam people. In fact, I just talked to some of my friends in Amsterdam yesterday who have been trying to shut down this the Lady of All Nations thing for years now, but it just keeps popping its head up. Nilica was there with a priest, one of the 5 priests that was ordained in Fatima in 1992. His name is Paul Sigel, and Sigel and Nilica and a few of his other priests were heavily involved in Medjugorje as well. They were also involved in Northern California with a woman named Marcia Ann McCormick Smith. Marcia Ann McCormick Smith has had my wife Artie under mind control for 12 years. In fact, they live together right now. And let me tell you what happened. In early 1998, I had gotten a hold of the video called Visions on Demand, which featured mainly E. Michael Jones from South Bend, Indiana. He used to be the Fidelity magazine, now he has Culture Wars. And when we circulated that video in early 1998, all hell broke loose. We got threats from a guy in Sterling, Virginia by the name of Ted Flynn that we would be prosecuted criminally and civilly. And then by May of 1998, E. Michael Jones wrote the book called Medjugorje Deception, which included quite a bit of my story because Jones and I worked together on this entire investigation. At the same time, when we sent the copy of the video, Visions on Demand, to Father Malachi Martin in New York, we had a person from California hand-deliver it to him. We got a postcard back from Father Malachi Martin. Now, remember, he was a Jesuit at one time, too. Mm-hmm. And, of course, Nilica was Jesuit. Here's what Malachi Martin wrote to us on May 27th, 1998. So many thanks for what you sent me and so many congratulations on taking on the Medjugorje hoax. It has been a target of my criticism for 15 years. It was satanic from the beginning. Blessings, Father Malachi Martin.
Yeah, and that comes from a name that everybody out there remembers. And Medjugorje is an apparition that the Catholic Church says is, I guess it is verified now as real, correct? No. In fact, we just got documents 2 days ago, which I'm going to get into a little later on. Good. Update.
But Pope Benedict there's no way they're going to approve it.
Okay, good. But Nilica is behind the scenes trying to approve it, correct?
Well, he has been since about 1984. And of course, that was when he was in Medjugorje, and he was running around with that briefcase with $3 million in cash, trying to buy Roberto Calvi's briefcase. We've talked about that before. Mm-hmm. Well, let me go further on this Medjugorje thing. Then in 1998, then I was involved with people in England, and we did another video called "Cover Up: Divine or Deceived," and we released that in July of 1998, and that raised another storm. And this woman, Marcia Smith, who was involved heavily with Bishop Nielsen and his crowd. She had an attorney by the name of Joseph P. Rusinello from San Francisco, and Rusinello wrote a letter to both E. Michael Jones and to Rick Salvato. You remember Rick Salvato's name, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm going to get into that, what he just put out a little while ago, a few days ago. And Joseph Rusinello threatened Jones and Salvato with lawsuits over a book called Medjugorje Deception, and then, of course, a video also called Cover Up. So, I mean, there was something really big going on here that we didn't know at the time of what Rusinello's role really was. He's a very controversial character.
Yeah, and I might add, Nilica's name also came up in the Vatican Bank scandal, some saying that he was the behind-the-scenes puppet master of Cardinal Marcinkus, and then, of course, in Amsterdam, of course, here, and, of course, no one around, I've talked to a number of Jesuits recently. They don't even know who he is here. They have no idea, so, I mean, or at least they say they do. So I find it so strange that this has been such a well-kept secret over the years, and I really think it's time Americans start talking about most everything. If we're in this spiritual war, as Bush says, this is a very important aspect of it, I believe, don't you?
Absolutely. And actually, it was around 1995 that a small booklet was published down in Santa Barbara by Queenship Publishing called Medjugorje, What Does the Church Say? And it was written by Dennis Nolan in South Bend, Indiana, with Sister Emmanuel Millard, who came from France, but she's been in Medjugorje for years. She's a fake nun. She's not a Catholic nun. And that book listed over 200 cardinals, archbishops, and bishops as either having been to Medjugorje and putting their stamp of approval on it, or having heard about Medjugorje and advising people that it's a good place to go.
Now, in the beginning, when we first started talking, you said it's satanic from the beginning. Tell us what you mean by that.
Well, those are Father Malachi Martin's words.
Okay.
That's what he sent to us. But I can tell you this: in 1999, I came back from Europe. I was over there for about 2 months. I came back and went to St. Louis. I got a hold of a Father Ivo Sivrich. He was in St. Louis in a Croatian parish. Father Ivo Sivrich wrote one of the very first books against Medjugorje with another fellow from Canada. And he took a lot of heat.
Phil, can you hold on? And when we come back from our first break, we'll get right back with what he wrote back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal. Break interrupted you?
I believe I was talking about the meeting I had with Father Ivo Sivrich in St. Louis in 1999. And I went to his living quarters and spent about 2 hours with him. And he gave me permission to tape record the conversation. And I wanted to know what his experience was as far as the beginning of Medjugorje. And, of course, he was born and raised right there in that village. And what he told me was unbelievable. We got information, and Michael Jones wrote about it, that Medjugorje was selected to be the place in 1981. The background is this. There were 2 priests there at the time. Father Jozo Zavko was the pastor, and the assistant was Father Tomislav Vlasic. And Father Sivrich confirmed this to me, that Vlasic had been the pastor at Chapelina, which is a village not very close to Medjugorje. He had an affair. He got a nun pregnant in 1976. Her name was Manda, I believe. And then he had her shipped off to Germany.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there, take a break, be back with Phil Kronzer on the Investigative Journal.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased. It has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, we're back on the Investigative Journal for the second half hour on this Friday. And Phil Kronzer, I can't even remember how many times I interviewed him. This was an ongoing story that I did for months. And Phil picks it up here, and you may be a little bit confused, so let me just say a few things. First, let me apologize for a few of the skips in the tape, but I'm playing an old tape, and I'm having trouble stopping it, so you heard some of the commercials, but I can't help it. But I think I got it straightened out for this half hour. Secondly, Phil was a rich, a very wealthy and successful businessman, a multimillionaire from San Francisco. And his wife, they were devout Catholics, and they would make pilgrimages every year to the Mother Mary apparitions. When they went to Medjugorje, things changed in their life. And Phil's wife, who was basically taken away to a convent there by Father Nilika, who had basically done a whole study on Phil, knowing his assets, how much money he had, and their goal was to break up their marriage and then to get at his money. And so Phil's wife, they told his wife that he'd been cheating on her for years, which was false, and his wife never returned to this day. And the story's incredible. So that's how Phil got involved. So he began then to investigate Medjugorje and in turn all the other phony Mother Mary apparitions, and his life just was turned upside down. Needless to say, he lost his business. He also was on the run for years and had to live out of the country because they were charging him with some phony charges because he was getting deep into where the money was going to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands instead of to the poor, and the real corruption in Medjugorje and the Vatican itself. So let's get back. That's just a rough outline. And I remember talking to Phil many times when he couldn't disclose his location, etc., etc. And after this interview, maybe I'll try to find him again. Let's go back to Phil Kronzer.
Where she had a son that was his son, and he kept promising and writing to her that he would leave the order. And then Bishop Zonich at the time got wind of it. He actually went to Germany and found out where the boy was. And then Father Evo also told me that Vlasic was having an affair with a married woman in Chapolita while he was a pastor there just before Medjugorje started. And then on Jozo Zavko, he told me that Jozo Zavko attempted to rape his niece, the daughter of his sister. So Father Evo was very, very upset. That's why he wrote the first book, and he took a lot of heat for it. But the thing, again, as Jones wrote about and I knew about, Steubenville, Ohio, the Franciscan University of Steubenville, who really were the ones who were the movers and shakers behind that apparition thing in the first place. Okay. That's the history on that.
Okay.
And there was all kinds of sects involved. In fact, the priest that knows more about anything that was going on over there than anybody is Father Philip Pavich. And Pavich lives in Chicago now, and he spent a better part of 10 or 12 years in Medjugorje, the English-speaking priest, and he no longer believed in it. Even by the end of the 1980s, he didn't believe in it anymore.
Well, in Medjugorje, what happened was how many children were there? Six children that supposedly saw the Mother Mary and gave them messages, correct?
Right, exactly. It was June 25th of 1981.
Now, did you ever trace the reality of this? I mean, has anybody ever really traced where these kids set up?
There's all kinds of speculation that there was smoking. There could have been some pot and drugs involved. Could have been. We know there was some sensitivity training going on. What Jones wrote about it in his book Medjugorje Deception, about there were these charismatics. They were into what they call blind milling, walking around the room with their eyes closed, and then you bump into somebody and then you share with them. A lot of weird stuff that was going on at the same time. And several Franciscans were involved, and they all ended up becoming totally disobedient.
Right. And, what happens here for our listeners is that why would they do this? Well, all these apparitions turn into cash cows. There's a lot of money involved here.
That's
correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Into the hundreds of millions.
Yeah, and so, look at it from an investigator's point of view. Okay, it's either true or it's not. Well, if it's not true, how did they set up these kids? You set up 6 kids. They see a Mother Mary apparition. All of a sudden it becomes this holy miracle. Millions of people who come from around the world. And then you got this Jesuit Bishop Nilica running around with a suitcase full of $3 million for other reasons, always in the background. So what are we supposed to do? Just say, oh boy, it's the church, let's forget about it. I don't think so, because what happened to you is a travesty. Go ahead.
Well, as I said, what Father Malachi Martin wrote to us about it being satanic, I'll share this with the audience. I spent a lot of time in Fatima, and Fatima is an approved apparition. But, they're in there trying to destroy that whole thing too. But I have a house in Fatima, and last year, a friend of mine, Carlos Ibarista, who wrote a book entitled 2 Hours with Sister Lucy, he got a call from a priest near Fatima, about 20 kilometers away, and the priest wanted to see me. And when I went to see him, he told me, he said, your wife is not coming back. He said, your wife is under the complete grip of Satan, and he said she will save her soul 5 minutes before she dies. Of course, I was devastated, but he was testing me. He's 89 years old. He's a very holy priest. He's actually a mystic, and he's very well thought of. And he told me, he said, you've been under guidance for 10 years. He said, when you first came here, when your problem started, you made a pledge to Our Lady, and she's holding you to it.
Well, listen,
I made my pledge to continue.
Okay, and what we'll do, I want to tell our audience a little bit about your personal story, and then we'll get back right after this break on the Investigative Journal.
All right.
Okay, so the deal here with Phil was quite interesting. At the time that I knew Phil in 2006, you remember he came from a devout Catholic background, and he still was holding out hope that there was a good side of the church and a bad side of the church. And so instead of arguing with Phil over these questions, I wanted to just get the truth about Medjugorje. Now, some of his statements regarding whether there is a good side of the church and a bad side of the church, I'll leave for another show and for you to piece out. But the real key here is, I believe, that this deception goes to Fatima, goes to all these Mother Mary deceptions, and all of them are cash cows. And the reason I do that is I've talked to some people in former shows of mine, former nuns, who were working at some for Sister Teresa and others at Fatima. Left the nunnery, and they were working on the books, and they had similar stories about the corruption. So I don't think it's just Medjugorje. But anyway, I didn't want to get into that with Phil because I didn't want to lose track or a point on Medjugorje. So we're going to get back to him. I'm going to try and get past this 3-minute break, and I should do it here.
Okay, my guest is Phil Kronzer, and he had his life ripped apart when he went to visit Medjugorje with his wife. He'd been married for 30 years, never many problems. I mean, a good marriage, good children, a good living. Went there, and his life just was never the same since. And before I get into his personal story, let me mention that, Phil's learned throughout this investigation that there's an evil hand within the church trying to destroy it. Maybe that evil hand extending, and not maybe, but extending into our government, extending into other religions, other places. And that's why this story is important, because if you can see how the mind control manipulation in the money travels here, just imagine when you get into government and other areas, the connections, I think, can be made. Phil, tell us about this personal story, because this started it all for you.
Well, yes, actually, a 39-year marriage, and we'd been to Medjugorje several times, starting in 1987, actually, was the first time. I went back about 5 times. In fact, I even helped a couple of young fellows from Northern California start a tour business there, because they were very close to the visionaries. We were right there with the visionaries, and we were right on the inside track. And then my wife already got involved with some other people, this Marcia Smith woman and another so-called visionary by the name of Vasula Ryden, who was condemned by Cardinal Ratzinger himself years ago because she was Greek Orthodox, so he put the kibosh on her. And another one from Ireland called Christina Gallagher, who's another total fraud. She's a visionary. And then the main one was Teresa Lopez in Denver, Colorado, who became literally the personal seer for Bishop Milisa and his traveling group of, basically, I call them cult operators.
Right.
And so she got drawn into it. And then in 1994, to June 30th, on my 60th birthday, I came home to empty closets. She was gone, and that's where my trouble began. I had no idea what I was walking into, but when I got into it, the deeper I got, the worse it got. It got highly political. We've got a congressman from California that was involved by the name of Congressman Tom Lantos. We got a congressman from New Jersey was involved, Congressman Chris Smith. We had this big prayer session in the Rayburn House in October 1997. And, of course, it took me a long time to figure out what was going on, but I'm getting connections to Planned Parenthood. I'm getting connections to NOW. The connections here are unbelievable, and there's so much money involved. And we know they were moving a lot of money through Medjugorje. There's a lot of money laundering going on because they raided the banks over there in, I believe it was April of 2001. They actually raided 4 or 5 banks. One of them was right in Medjugorje. And they found 4,000 corporate accounts, all kinds of fraud, credit card fraud, drugs, pornography, you name it, that was there. And then that investigation went on for a little over a year up in Sarajevo, and then it was all shut down and hushed up. But one of the checks we got back from one of the charities went to a bank in Zagreb, which identified with Lawrence Eagleberger and Henry Kissinger. So it is political. Yeah. There's so much money involved, it's unbelievable.
Now, if you could just kind of tell us throughout this investigation, what type of harassment did you undergo? I mean, you would think that in a case like this, you want to get at the truth. I mean, the main goal here is to find out what they were doing there. But what happened to you? What was their attack? What was their modus operandi against you?
Well, aside from over a dozen death threats, this actually was in April of 2003. I was uncovering so much stuff that they were getting nervous into what happened. Unfortunately, I had people working with me from Liverpool, England. I had people working with me in Portugal and Fatima. I had people in the United States working with me, and eventually the enemy was able to literally take them all away from me just by basically giving them more money. I've spent an ungodly amount of money. The truth is, it's over $2 million now. I mean, it's unbelievable what they've taken and what they did. But then in April, something happened in April of 2003. Something triggered it, and they made a move on me. And what they did, there were envelopes that were prepared with white powder inside of them to simulate anthrax. And we
sent you letters like that?
No. They sent them. The letters were, we know this for a fact. The letters were sent from England on April 29th, 2003 2 police stations, one in my town in Los Gatos here, the other one in the neighboring town, and 1 residence in San Jose. Those we know for sure because I was called in by the postal inspectors. I had to do fingerprints, palm prints.
Oh, they were trying to frame you.
Absolutely, yes. Okay. And I took a lie detector test with the FBI in San Jose on May 30th of 2003. Now, this has been going on for 3 years. It took me 3 months to get cleared of any suspicion. I keep feeding information to the postal inspectors in San Francisco, and nobody's doing anything about it. So you can see how deep this runs.
Yeah, and you see, the real point here is that this whole story, all this whole stuff has always been off the radar screen. It's almost like taboo in the mainstream press. We don't talk about things like this. And then you don't hear about it anywhere. I mean, you try to talk to the church, and they act like, what the heck is that? They don't even respond. But here's what I'm getting at. If you're a Catholic, you were a devout Catholic, a businessman who was successful, had a good family,
right,
and all of a sudden this hits you personally. So you have an interest in finding out the truth, and you start uncovering rocks, you start looking, and you see, let's just talk generally here, or about one priest. You find Nilica, a Jesuit bishop, involved in all this stuff. He then comes up in Amsterdam. His name is popped up behind the scenes in the Vatican Bank. In fact, his name back then was involved in an indictment that he was almost going to face three years in jail for that. Right. He was in the background, and the Italian authorities that never got covered here in America were trying to arrest him and trying to put him in jail for what he was doing. Well, that got hidden, and I guess bribes behind the scenes there, and he was let off. But he's still walking around, with his bishop's hat on, spreading the word of Christ, supposedly. Now, doesn't that make anybody suspicious that if one person's doing it, maybe there's something more? Then you find out there's a Jesuit cardinal who his father was the Secretary of State in our country, and then you find all these connections. I mean, don't people want to know? And apparently, that may sound naive, but that's what's going on.
There is some dumbing down effect here, and it's just hard to get a grip on it because it's, number one, it's so evil. It's just a little bit almost beyond belief.
Yeah, it's amazing because basically, I'd like to see justice for you. I mean, to see your life destroyed like this, and then them to make it seem like you sent anthrax to people, that you're the bad guy. I know you're onto something.
Well, we're very close. Yeah, we're very close to bringing this thing to a head. In 1997, Greg, I put out 3 documents of my own called Wolves in Catholic Clothing, Part 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
And I was trying to smoke this thing out to find out. They were after my business. They were after me. They turned all 3 of my children against me. My kids are all in their 40s, and they haven't talked to me in 7 years. And 5 grandkids that I don't get to see anymore. They've tried every trick in the book. They've got into my businesses. They just tried to destroy it. They were into my the bank accounts. I had property in Portugal. They demolished me over there. Mm-hmm. This is one heck of a network, and I know I'm up against something rather large here, but I'm not going to back off. In fact, I'm working on Wolves in Catholic Clothing Part 4 and Part 5, which will be all out before the end of May, and I'm going to start putting it up on my website. It's a huge story, and it would take just you couldn't explain it. I've got 12 years, but I'm just trying to hit the most important parts of it. And there's definitely a connection with Planned Parenthood. There's definitely a connection with NOW. What I did, remember, you know the word GOSPA, G-O-S-P-A, that's for the Blessed Virgin Mary and creation. Mm-hmm. They did a movie with Martin Sheen some years ago. Martin Sheen played Jozo Zavko. It was a total flop. So when I had GOSPA, G-O-S-P-A, I put a word out, and I coined the phrase, grant our sisterhood papal autonomy. And boy, they come after me then. Yeah. I can tell you there's definitely a new age radical feminist group behind this thing, and they run in cells. They run like the communists do. You cannot smoke them out. But I've smoked them out, and that's why they're coming after me.
Yeah, and I mean, it's incredible because, when you look at this on the surface, you say, well, okay, you have these miracles that the Catholic Church says were true, and then you look at these two and you see the same people coming up, and then The point of the matter is, what have you uncovered as far as, let's talk a little bit more generally here, as far as the Jesuit, have you uncovered anything as far as any kind of Jesuit connection to this?
Well, Neelis is really the only connection I've got to the Medjugorje phenomena. We've got plenty of things going on here in Northern California with the Jesuits. Right in my hometown in Los Gatos, there was a scandal back in, 2002 is when it broke. I read at the novitiate here in Los Gatos, the Jesuit novitiate. Some of the Jesuits up there were accused of molesting a couple of retarded guys, and the payoff on that was $7.3 million. And the provincial at that time in Los Gatos was a known homosexual living with a crossdresser. You had a Jesuit running at the University of San Francisco, Stephen Privé.
That's one of their universities.
Yeah, right in San Francisco, is all Jesuit. He's homosexual. What they do is they target traditional Catholics. I happen to be, although I don't have trouble with the Novus Ordo Mass if it's done properly, but I've gone back to the Latin Mass. But born and raised Catholic, I was a relatively successful businessman, beautiful wife, good family, kids and everything, and I became a target. Number one, I was on the finance committee in my parish for many, many years, and I was asking a lot of questions about where the money was going and why people were being paid for not even being there and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. So, and what I really found out is that the San Jose Diocese is one of the worst in the entire United States. We're finding out that most of these bishops in the United States are more interested in us being sensitive to the needs of the transvestites and homosexuals, and they don't care about the people who built these churches, which is us, the Catholics that follow the teaching of the church.
Right. Yeah.
And see, right now, Greg, too, see, Bishop Bruskowitz is taking...
Okay, we got a little problem with the media encounter, but I think what you see there is kind of what Phil was saying, and I'm trying to get this back. Very interesting why it just stopped, but I'm going to try to play it again. But anyway, I've only got 2 minutes left, and at this particular... There we go.
How did they get you? What, they put your name on the letter, or what they...
No, it was what they...
I'm trying to get back to that spot. And I can't do it. But anyway, let's say I only have 2 minutes left, and that interview with Phil Kronzer, it just keeps going and going, doesn't it? It's got a mind of its own today. But such is technology. But anyway, I will look up a couple more of these interviews that get in depth. But the real key to this whole story, and when I last talked to Phil, I believe it was 2010 or 11, he was still on the run, still trying to get to the truth, still finding that the apparition at Medjugorje was fake to begin with. That Nilika, the Jesuit bishop, was in charge of laundering the money and keeping the cult alive there. His wife fell into that cult, and she was used to bring down Phil, well, basically to get Phil's money. They didn't realize they had a tiger by the tail. And Phil never quit because he wanted to clear his name. And in his whole hope, to me, he always said this, he wanted to get his wife back and couldn't fathom what had happened to him. And it was an incredible story. And what he went through, and not only the anthrax, trying to frame him with anthrax. I mean, they charged him with other crimes in Alabama when he was going through there. Then he had to leave for Jamaica to get out of the country. He went under several names. And they were trying to liquidate all his assets, trying to basically take every last penny. Then his wife, of course, filed a divorce case, and that was going on. So she was going to get the money. And guess where that money was going to go to? She was going to give the money to the church. So you can see how this operates. Now, I say that Medjugorje is just one of many of these, like Fatima and others, that the Vatican has created, and to create these cash cows. Phil had traced, well, some of his research. He had money to spend for investigators, so this is one reason he got it. He traced the money going into accounts of Henry Kissinger and others. So you can see the bribery, the payoffs are all over the place, and why the Vatican is protected and works together with your government. So we'll be back Monday on the Investigative Journal. In light of all this, these bad news, have a good weekend. See you tomorrow on the Monday on the Investigative Journal.